at Eyewitness Palestine. We're really happy to have you join us today. Um, Today's Zoom, as you know, we have Zooms throughout the month that we do as part of our educational programming. Today's Zoom is a report back from our recent trip to Gaza, which was a medical mission that Eyewitness Palestine did the logistics for through an organization called GLIA. I want to shout out Tariq Lubani and Dorothea from GLIA who supported us during this trip. And I want to shout out all the amazing doctors that joined us on this trip as well. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the mission. Um, I want to just thank everybody that's in here, the donations. We're going to drop the links in the chat for you. Please continue to donate and support this work. We will be continuing to support the medical missions that are going, referring doctors and such, to continue to support the Palestinian healthcare workers on the ground. So the mission we went on, myself and Moureen Kaki, who is our programming and operations coordinator, we went from March 20th through no March 20
No, you're right. April. I was trying to say April 1st as the
to
end.
April 1st. Yeah, I was trying to figure out the date we left. It feels like it was a decade ago at this point. But we got back a week and a half ago. And so we want to tell you about the trip. The mission was for the doctors that were with us to provide healthcare at various sites, and the sites that we were located in were throughout Rafah, and one location in Dir al-Balah called Shuhada al-Aqsa Hospital. The other locations were Najjar Hospital, Tal al-Sultan Clinic, the Emirati Hospital, and the Indonesian Field Hospital. People get it confused with the Indonesian in the north, which is no longer functioning. It was one of the first to be attacked and go and to totally be out of service. The Indonesian Field Hospital is run by Doctors Against Borders, Without Borders, and it's in Rafah in Tel El Sultan area. The doctors would report to work every morning and work a full day in these various hospitals. Myself and Maureen would attend UN security briefings through the World Health Organization and the United Nations to gather security information on what was happening on the ground. They would report back from the day before and anything that they'd heard in the morning. And this could include, the total number of schools. So I remember by the time we left, it was 140 schools had been totally destroyed. By the time we left a week and a half ago, they give you numbers on the number of deaths of Palestinians, and the unaccounted for, and according to the Ministry of Health, which is reporting from Gaza. We stayed in an area called Jnena, which is in East Rafah. We stayed in a residential building in an apartment, which they call deconflicted, as well as our routes that we were able to drive on. And I say deconflicted because, as we've seen from the recent and one of thousands of attacks on internationals, but the most recent one on the World Central Kitchen, they were on the same road that we drove, quite a few times during our trip. And their clearly marked vehicle was attacked, and when the survivors tried to get into the next vehicle, that was attacked, and when they got into the third vehicle, that was also attacked by the occupation forces, and all three vehicles were clearly marked as internationals. And the way you get in is coordinated with the occupation. They know that you're going in, they have the list of names, they vet the people, and you have to get permissions to be able to enter. Essentially, we entered as the GLIA NGO under a larger UN convoy, which we all traveled together in, and for the most part, all traveled together out. During the stay, I'm gonna try and cover some things that I know are probably questions on people's minds. Harry, our wonderful board member, from Eyewitness, asked me yesterday if we felt safe, at any point, and it actually made me cry, and we didn't, not for 1 second, feel safe. There was no sense of safety whatsoever, even with the deconfliction. There was bombing all night and sometimes during the day. I think at like 2:30 in the afternoon one day they bombed a house down the street. A huge missile. It didn't actually explode, but it did obviously smash the house, and an 8-year-old girl was killed as a result of that. Um, the house next to us was bombed, I believe, a few days before we arrived. But there were missiles dropping all night. And that's not for us, for anyone to feel sorry for us. We chose to go because the work that the doctors were doing is helping the healthcare workers in Palestine. It's relieving them a little bit. But the bigger picture is, how are Palestinians living like this every single day? Um, you know, of course you fear for your life and you think about your family every time a bomb hits, but the bigger question is, how is this people's lives? Like, how is this an everyday thing for folks when you think about the young children that we worked with? Um, we know that their entire life has been like this, not since October of 2023, but their entire existence. And so that was the harder part to really fathom. Um, I'm gonna again just, push folks to support us in this work. For Eyewitness Palestine and our staff, we funded ourselves through the support of folks, and as GLIA and Eyewitness Palestine, we were able to take in a very large amount of medical aid and equipment. Um, the hospitals, essentially the doctors that are there, can see what is needed and what isn't needed, and we'll get into more details about what we saw, and hopefully if we get one of the doctors to be able to run hide from a shift right now, because most of them are working back here and across the world. Maybe they can give you a little bit on their experience, but we can tell you what was happening that we saw in the hospitals, just things that you would never imagine are possible, things that you would say, like, how is this even happening, choosing what babies should live, because you only have space for two babies, but you have three newborns, premature babies, and you can only keep two alive, and you have to choose which two are more likely to make it, or which families. It's just a wild situation. So please keep supporting us. We are definitely we're definitely going to support the efforts of GLIA, and continue to try and support the healthcare workers in Palestine. We are actually working on setting up a Zoom with some of the directors of these hospitals that we worked with, so they can come and tell you what it's like to run a hospital or a clinic under these circumstances. Um, I also want to let people know that we do have, at the end of this month, a Zoom that is a virtual delegation of Hebron El Khalil. Its proper name is El Khalil. And if you would like to sign up for that and you're not already on our mailing list, please do go to our website, www.eyewitnesspalestine.org, and sign up. I know Maureen is dropping the links for folks to donate. Um, if you don't see the donate button next to the amount, you can just go to the bottom and put other donation, or you can go directly to our website and donate there as well. I'm going to pass it to Maureen from here.
All right, thanks so much, Nancy. And thank you to everybody for being on the call with us today. As Nancy said, my name is Moureen. I am the Program and Operations Coordinator, excuse me, here for Eyewitness Palestine. Just hitting technical snag so we don't get some more noise as I'm presenting here, and then I'll share my screen and get started. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see my screen okay? Thank you. All right. So some of the things Nancy had just brushed up on, so I won't I'll go over them rather quickly. But as she said, we did go in as logistical leads for a medical delegation with GLIA. And if you don't know about GLIA, we can drop their information in the email and in the chat that we send out after this webinar, so you can learn more about them, because they are really a wonderful organization worth supporting. And I'm super thankful for the opportunity to be in Gaza for like this particular moment, and be able to do the things that we did and offer a modicum of help in what is genuinely an ocean of need. And so yeah, I chose these as like the intro tiles or intro um, photos, because it really is sort of a symbolic of the entire trip. It was extremely bittersweet, right? It was disaster coupled with the joy of meeting new people and Palestinians and connecting with them, versus like the heartbreak of the stories and the things that we saw. And so it was just a huge mix of emotions. And that was true from the onset. So we had our delegation was a total of 12 folks. We had 10 physicians and or healthcare workers with us, and then myself and Nancy. And as Nancy said, they were stationed in a variety of hospitals, mostly in Rafah, but in Deir al-Balah. These are some of our delegates in these photos. The one to my left is at Mustashfa Shuhada Al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah that Nancy had mentioned earlier, including the director of that hospital. And then there is, I think, most of our delegation, maybe minus one, on the right with our driver Ahmed, who was our driver throughout our time in Rafah. And so, not getting into the important, this is the less important detail, so I'll kind of skim over it real quick. But we did all meet in Cairo. So this is a delegation of folks who were mostly meeting each other for the first time, and from a variety of mix of backgrounds, from Qatar, from Jordan, a lot of Palestinians who it was their first time going into Palestine, um, and Canadian physicians as well. So we did stay primarily in Rafah, with the exception of one of our healthcare workers who was stationed in Deir al-Balah at Al-Aqsa. And just some quick details about Rafah, if you're unfamiliar. I'm sure that most of the folks on the call are aware, of course, of the genocide that's happening in all of Gaza, but Rafah details specifically. The pre-October population of Rafah was 280,000 people. Currently, it is home to 1.7 million people, mostly internally displaced persons. That's the IDPs is on the slide there. And so you can imagine that in and of itself creates a massive infrastructure problem. I mean, 1.7 million people in an area designed for 280,000 without bombs dropping and being under siege is already quite the sort of overload. So adding the constant bombing, drones, people being killed. There's the food situation. Obviously, the nutrition situation is horrendous, right? And people are kind of tired of canned foods as well. You'll see often along the roads as you're driving that the one thing from the aid box that's almost certain to get sold is the canned food. Because that's not Palestinian food, right? There's a lot of sort of use of living off the land and consuming fresh foods, and that's just completely unavailable. So I mean, unfortunately, those who do have enough nutrition are considered like lucky in the context of what's happening, especially compared to North Gaza, where we did not have the opportunity to go. But it's still not any way that any human being should be expected to live. Utilities also are non-existent, of course, because of the attacks by the occupation forces. That includes water. Electricity is pretty much solar fueled. Wi-Fi is available. It's just pretty unstable. And the past couple days, as we're trying to connect with friends and folks in Rafah, it seems that it has become more unstable. Sewage issues are a massive problem, right? Which sort of exacerbates the spread of disease and illness. And there's really not much relief anywhere you go. Even if you were somebody who is from Rafah originally, there's really not much reprieve, right? And I have here a video that I believe you took, Nance, of the constant drone sounds, which is like another form of sort of psychological warfare that the Israelis conduct, is that there's constantly the threat of something and you really don't know what's going to happen next. So I'll play that for you and we'll move on to the next slide.
Well, we can't hear it, honey.
Let me see. What?
Just to tell you too, this is like inside the house. This is us sitting in the living room. This is how it sounds.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So that's just to give you a sense. That's the constant sound. And you know, it only took us a few days for us to go from like being able to identify the sort of drones from the fighter jets. And then also you get a sense of what starts to happen when you hear certain sounds, right? Like you'll hear one drone and then you'll hear a second drone come in sometimes. And then if both of those drones disappear, everybody sort of braces themselves for the return of a jet, right? Often people be like, okay, it's pretty indicative that they found some sort of target that they're looking for, and they'll return. So people are anticipating the blast. So I mean, we only survived under this for 2 weeks. There are children who have been born, babies who have been born under these sounds, children, youth who have been living this for 6 months, and everybody in between, right? And so you can imagine what that does to the psyche of a person after some time. Um, yeah. Um, so just a little bit of background of Rafah. I included some pictures here of the different demolished houses that we just happen to be driving by at a given point. And then Nancy, I don't want to put you on the spot, so feel free not to, but I think you took these two pictures here of the folks that are gathering, if you'd like to explain those, or I'm happy to. I'll go
Sorry,
ahead.
I had my mic. Um, the picture in the top there, with the boy with the white jacket. As you can see on the left, there's a white water tank, and that's how people get water. Is through these tanks, and so it's just pure chaos because once it runs out, it runs out. So we also saw them, a lot of people carrying tanks on donkey and cart because there isn't as many vehicles, but there isn't enough petrol for the vehicles. So a lot of donkeys and carts, but that's essentially people trying to get water. And then this other picture down here with this guy with the black jacket with his back to us. That that is the only bank that is functioning in all of Gaza for 2.4 million people. There is a Bank of Palestine, which you can see is a little messed up. There is one ATM and it has a certain amount of money put into it every day that obviously doesn't last very long. It's being transferred from Ramallah into that ATM. And so every single day we would drive by there going from Janina to, the Dalil Sultan area. And every single day there would be thousands of people trying to get to the ATM. You just see everybody with their hands up with the cards in their hands, just scrambling to try and get some money out. I don't know what time they start because we would drive by at about 8:30, and it was like that every single day. So those are those two pictures.
Thank you, Nance. Yeah. Um, So, as Nancy had talked about earlier, our doctors are primarily stationed within three hospitals within Rafah, and also one in Deir al-Balah. So one of the hospitals was the Indonesian field hospital, which actually none of our doctors ended up working at due to sort of logistical reasons. But that's where we sort of ran point a lot of the time. As Nancy had mentioned, this is a hospital that was constructed by MSF, Doctors Without Borders. And while I mean, everybody in Gaza has some kind of nightmare story to tell. There is just no exception to that rule. You know what I mean? It's actually quite um I don't even want to say overwhelming because it's not. It's much more overwhelming to bear all of the things that they've had to bear, but it's just an incredible amount to take in when you start talking to people and hearing who they've lost, how many times they've had to relocate, what they've had to do for basic necessities, and things like that. And one of the probably the most striking stories that we had heard from in terms of people was um, that that of Abu Bara. He is the director of administration at the Indonesian field hospital. You can see him sitting right here in the black jacket. That's a photo of myself, Abu Bara, and Suhaib to his right, one of the physicians on our delegation, and Abdullah to his right, who is a occupational therapist, I believe, or an OT nurse, and he was the one who ended up getting stationed at Dir al-Balah. The picture that the little boy is holding is that of Abu Bara's family who were martyred. Um, Abu Bara is the father of 6 children. Him and his wife are the parents to 6 children. 4 of those children, I believe they were 4 of his youngest, were killed in an attack on his home in Rafah. And it's I mean, not only where was his family killed for absolutely no reason other than sort of racism and cause to the main cause that Israel wants Palestinians removed from Gaza, as a which is settler colonialism. But it's on top of that, Abu Bara learned about the way that his family was murdered because their remains, their bodies were brought into the hospital that he was working at. And so this man who is seeing and enduring so many things while trying to keep things going at one of the most important hospitals in the area of Rafah, also ends up realizing that his family is um, has been killed and has been brought in there. And it's really I mean, there's not really words to describe. Like I hesitate to use things like sort of steadfast, and there's a word in Arabic and that we use. I'm sure many of you have heard of it, called samud, to describe the sort of steadfastness and the resilience of Palestinians. And it's a weird thing as somebody from the outside who is looking into this and like seeing how many people have died, how many people have lost, the conditions that people are currently living in, and talk about steadfastness, right? So some people hold that label with a source of pride, while others are just exhausted and they don't want to have to be that way, right? Because there's no way to endure that as a human being for that long. And yet some people continue to do so. Um, and so Abu Bara presses on with his work. He does distributions within the camps. The probably the most remarkable thing that struck me about him was that he greeted us with such kindness and warmness and welcome, that we didn't find out about the story of his family being martyred until probably a day or two that we got to know him. And it was just it was pretty remarkable that somebody who had been through so much less than probably 2 months before um, still had that level of generosity and care and thoughtfulness for other people. Yeah. So I just wanted to pass on his story too, because it was one of the ones, many that we heard, that sort of stood out. And he was interested in wanting people to see his family the way that he wants them remembered. He wanted people to know, and so that's also why this was one of the stories that I chose to share with y'all today. Um, Emirati Hospital was another one that our physicians were stationed at. I believe 2 of our physicians were stationed there. That is one of our physicians who will hopefully be joining us. I think Dr. Aman Ade, who happens to live an hour and a half away from me in the city of Austin. And she is a pediatrician. Emirati is a PICU NICU, so pediatric / neonatal intensive care unit. I believe it's the only one in Rafah. And you can see one of our other doctors, Dr. Mateen, who's an emergency physician with a neonatal baby there. And in the photo, we have 2 of our doctors, including Dr. Aman, with Dr. Muhammad Salama of the Emirati. I wanted to include the photo of Dr. Salama here because This man, I mean, he needs so much more than recognition, and basic, the treatment of basic respect and dignity. But to see this man in action is something that was really striking. He is exhausted. He sleeps in the hospital. He sometimes looks like he's about to like fall asleep while you're talking to him, and yet he presses on, for his patients. And while I don't know how many folks are in the medical field and how much this will resonate with people. I'm not in medicine, but he explained it to us, so I want to relay it. The things that they work with, as Nancy talked about, are just beyond the bare minimum, beyond the bare minimum. So Dr. Salama was telling us a story about how he had to insert a central line into a baby who weighed 650 grams, which is about a pound. They were a premature baby, and if you're unfamiliar, in order to insert a central line, in most, like in the United States, for example, you need constant imaging, like through X-ray or something similar that takes a constant picture of where you're at with the line, because otherwise it can result in like something fatal if you do it wrong. Dr. Sanama needed to insert a central line into this premature baby, otherwise they were going to die. And he did so blind, and he did it successfully, and under the conditions that he is in. And I don't say that to make a hero out of him, as if that's something people should be able to do, but on top of everything, on top of the lack of sleep, on top of not getting paid, so he doesn't have the means to take care of his family as he normally would, on top of not having a home to rest in, he's still that committed to his patients, and good at what he does. So yeah. We're going. Um, these are when somebody asks me what my sort of like favorite part about the trip is, and such a weird question to ask, because I don't I'm not trying to romanticize what's happening under here by any means. This is a genocide at the end of the day. At least 40,000 Palestinians have been killed, and most importantly, they've been killed in a way that was completely needless, and is entirely rooted by race, like rooted in racism. But yet these kids were the most, there was just so much joy to be had from them. There's different youth in this photo. But one of the ones that sort of struck out that I'll take a moment to talk about is this picture here of the three young boys, or four young boys really, in the window. So the kids caught on to us, with our van, and between two of the hospitals, it was probably about a 2-minute drive. So they would see us at one hospital and sort of race our van to the other hospital to meet us there. And we would have like sort of silly exchanges. At first, they would see us and they'd be like, "Oh, a Janib," like foreigners. And Nancy was really, really funny. She would go through and they would like, yell from the window and be like, "Hi, how are you?" And she would respond with an accent in English. And they would think that she was a foreigner. And then at the end, she would be like, "Alhamdulillah," and start talking to them in an Arabic that they recognized as familiar. And they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, these people are not foreigners, they're Arab and they're Palestinians." And so it sort of created a quick bond with these youth, who, honestly, some of them are obviously people are doing in different conditions, but many of these youth that we met, um, it's clear that they're malnourished, just from lack of availability of stuff. They're often wearing the same clothes over and over again if they haven't been wearing them for months, as is. They either don't have shoes, or the damage done to their shoes are so is so much that the shoes are rendered like useless, right? And one of the things that people talked about often was as that kids were cutting their feet were getting infected for lack of clean water to clean them, for lack of antibiotics and access to consistent medical care, that would result in infections, which would accentuate a problem, right? And so we were able to bring in a few shoes with us to pass out and alleviate some of that, but that's just a need that is unparalleled, right? And has to be taken care of. And I mean, we're talking about just shoes, not anything else, right? And that's not something that's being brought in with these aid trucks, right? Um, Nancy, are there any of these photos here that you want to go into more detail with? I'm going to talk about the individual activities that we did with youth here in a second, but I wanted to give you that chance.
Yeah, no, just that they're everywhere. I mean, there's the neighborhood kids that would be out there at, 7:30 in the morning, just ready to greet us. I have a video with, if you see the little boy in the brown hoodie at the top there in the middle, Mahmoud, his name is. Um, you know, I have a video with him where I said, "This is my boy Mahmoud," and I was like, "Why do you come out here so early, every day to say what's up?" And he's like, "Because you guys are here helping our people." Um, and just everywhere we went, on the left there on the beach, they're all kids that are living in tents from the north on the beach. In fact, the kids, the neighborhood kids you see in that bottom picture, the whole group of them and those boys up there, they're all from the north. And they're just in our neighborhood, you know, in tents, taking refuge in Rafah. Um, and then the picture of Maureen there with the baby, that was, we did a puppet show, which was really fun. We had the kids laughing. And so that was one of the babies that attended our puppet show. And that's really it on the pictures. They're just amazing. They give you life.
They really do. They really do. Yeah. Thanks, Nance. So some of the activities that we did with the kids while, because you know, the doctors were doing their medical stuff, and we had, while they were doing that, there was a little bit of downtime because the structure of our days were that we would, you know, drop everybody off where they needed to go, attend security briefings, attend any meetings with folks, and then if we had some leftover time, we would try to squeeze in different activities with the neighborhood kids. We would arrange the sort of deconfliction to go to certain places where we were allowed to go, including the Camp Breakers crew in Nusayrat camp, the Delia Arts camp, which if you are familiar with Eyewitness Palestine's webinars, then you may remember that I think 2 months ago, my sense of time has lapsed in this past 3 weeks, but I think it was about 2 months ago, we did a fundraiser with Delia Arts in conjunction with Delia Arts as in the form of a webinar, and got to sort of see where they were physically at in this compound. We'll go over that here in just a second. But as Nancy mentioned a second ago, we also did a puppet show at Tal Sultan Clinic, which is the primary healthcare clinic in Rafah. And that was my first puppet show. That was it was quite the ride. Maybe if we have the stomach, we can share the video with them after Nancy, and they can all mock our characters and accents. But one of the things we did, a couple of times we got to play with the neighborhood kids, and it's funny because I mean, if you know Palestine, you know that the second you're out in the neighborhood, word gets around really, really fast. So what started as like, you know, a handful of children ended up being all the kids in the Hara in the neighborhood. And there was a couple of opportunities where we got to like sort of sing and play with them a little bit. I passed out balloons, we played frisbee, soccer even. And then on another turn, we had to bring our water supply in so we don't use the limited resources that are available in Gaza. And so we brought cases and cases of water. As you can imagine, we're supplying water for 12 people for at least 2 weeks a person. And so we ended up having a lot of plastic bottles. And Nancy, the creative genius that she is, had found this little sort of lantern idea, and we had some leftover decorative tape that we used to mark our bags to recognize them when they're going through the border. And we pierced holes through bottle caps and made like these little makeshift lanterns that the kids decorated with different colored tape. And by the time we were done, they were hanging in different parts of like the neighborhood, whether outside or inside the homes. And so it was small stuff like that to like take the kids away for a moment, even if for a moment. And uh yeah, it's because there's no mental health programs in Gaza, right? Like the primary focus right now seems to be rightfully so on basically just trying to keep as many people alive as possible, right? Which under these circumstances is already impossible. And so to add the idea of like needing to sort of, I mean, how do you do trauma therapy as the trauma continues and it can't be stopped and the rest of the world just sort of looks on, not making any real effort to stop it, right? I mean, how do you muster enough within yourself as the sort of adult or whatever it is to do that, and then B, like where do you, yeah, what do you do with the resources that are non-existent at your disposal? And so it was really an honor to be able to sort of do these kinds of activities with the youth and occupy their brains even for like 5 minutes. Yeah. Um, One of the other things we did was Nusayrat camp. There's the Camp Breakers crew. I'm sure many of you have heard of that particular it's a dance group for youth of all ages, as you can see in this sort of center photo here. There's like toddlers to teenagers. And uh Nancy's got Nancy, do you want to tell us about how we got connected to Camp Breakers? Because I feel like that's really your story to tell, but again, I'm happy to do it if you'd like.
I'm laughing at that picture, sorry.
I was gonna
Um,
put the video on here, but I decided to spare you, so
yeah, thank you. I did break dance for the kids. So Camp Breakers crew, I don't call it, I kind of broke my knee danced, not break danced. Um, Camp Breakers crew was started by a good friend of mine of over 20 years, Hamad Ghrez. It's in Nusayrat camp. Nusayrat camp is broken into a few different camps, and this was camp number two. And the Camp Breakers school has been around for at least 15 years. Um, providing therapy through dance, and other activities that they do, with the kids. And so, I've followed them for years online, and finally got a chance to go there. Um, are you going to talk about his family next door? So, Mo is has left Ghazi. And it's funny because Mo, during the 2008, 2009 bombardment of Ghazi, Mo was forced to work as a nurse pretty much, and he wasn't a nurse when he was still in Ghazi, and now he is actually a nurse in the US. So I just wanted to shout him out. But yeah, I mean, this was an absolute, it was such a day. It was amazing. But now they've been bombing Nuseirat for the past week, really crazily. Many children have died, and I'm literally looking at every video and picture to see if it's one of the kids that we met. And there's a couple of kids that really stuck out. There was one that was sitting, we brought a bunch of toys in, and we did it so that it was stuff they could share and like reuse. And so, um, me and Maureen were playing Uno. We brought cards, we were playing Uno with the kids. They were teaching us how to play it. And one of the boys says, I feel like I'm on vacation. And I was like, why? But like بالعربي, he said, حاسس حالي مسافر. I'm on vacation. And I was like, why? He said, I don't feel like I'm in a war while you guys are here. Just talking about how much fun he was having. And there's another little boy, Basha, who we have a video of, who said to me, there's a video of him looking at me, and he's like, will you, actually, he wasn't even looking directly at me. He was like, will you come back? He was like, Amanda, like, promise me that you'll come back. And I said, why? He said, because I'm having so much fun with you. I want you to come back. And so, this is the stuff, like, when you go and do activities and stuff, like, it's sad. Like the other kid that said, whatever is written for us, if we die, we die. If we stay alive, we stay alive. We live, we live. Like, these are little kids. Like, they shouldn't have to even be thinking about that. It should be the furthest thing from their mind. Um, just the balloons. We have videos of when we released those balloons from the top floor. I remember Dr. Aman looked up at me like, what are you doing? Because the kids jumped each other. So balloons are usually, available for super cheap. And now there's like hardly any balloons, if any, and super expensive. And so instead of taking a pack of like 25, we took a couple packs of 100 and blew them up, and then we threw them over the balcony. But it was what, like, to me, even like just a balloon, like how much joy it brought to these kids. Not to mention that we had to sign every single one. Like you can see Maureen signed B-Boy Lil Kevin's one, with Lil Kevin Goes Hard. But they wanted us to sign each one. And I remember one of them I wrote the boy's name, Lil Funk, and then I wrote The Whole World Loves You. And he asked me what it meant, and I told him in Arabic. And then all of them wanted me to write the same thing on their balloons.
um yeah, it was so that's one of the same kids, Lil Kevin here, whose real name is Ahmad, because they have dance names the same way that like hip hop artists have like sort of street artist names. And while we were blowing up the balloons to throw down to like the younger group who was at the bottom, the sort of, I would say, 12 to 16-year-olds were helping us maybe, because we divided them by age group and for different activities. And little Kevin here was like, looked to me and Nancy and was like, I just want to say thank you to you guys. And I said, why? Like, why are you thanking us? We're thankful to you guys for letting us come and hang out with you. And he goes, I just want to say thanks because all we want is to make the younger kids happy. And today you guys made them happy. And Ahmad is 14. He's 14 years old. And I couldn't imagine having that sort of wherewithal and wisdom and sense of caring, honestly, even for others at that age. And it just kind of blows my mind that through everything that they've seen, um, you know, in a situation where people can be driven to desperation, and that would be totally beyond understandable. Instead, youth like Ahmad and other people like him in Gaza develop a stronger sense of care for one another, and to witness that like firsthand was transformative in ways that I'm still trying to figure out. I think I have a couple of videos of the crew here on the next slide. So one of the activities that the instructors who are both the instructors that we met with, Muhammad and Musa, they're both 19 years old. So they're still too young to process this. Not that there's an age where this starts to make sense, but I mean, I can't fathom being 19 years old and being responsible for this many kids and trying to be responsible for some sort of trauma therapy and healing as the trauma continues without any sign of slowing down. And so one of the things that they do is they gather the kids in a circle. This is just one activity. They'll gather the children in a circle. And as you can see in this video here, the wall is got destroyed from after the house next door was bombed, which I'll get into in just a second. But they gather these youth in a circle, and he's holding, I believe it's Musa there that's holding some sort of like tennis ball or something. And the game is that as he throws it, depending on how high he throws it, he's asking the kids to sort of make noise. So if he throws it lower, the collective noise should be low. The higher he throws it, the louder they should get. And I honestly didn't even realize this until part way that he was doing this to distract him from the sounds of the jets and the drones that were nearby. After he finished with that activity, we just ended up taking a collective picture together. But just it's those kinds of things, right? That seem so small that I couldn't imagine thinking of and doing. And so their ordinary uh sort of mode of work is to teach kids breakdancing as therapy. And this little girl, I mean, look how small she is. And I say this as somebody who can't dance. So Nancy was kind enough and considerate enough of the kids to where she was like willing to break dance for the kids. I chickened out so hard and was like, no, I'm gonna be videographer instead. So these are the kids. I mean, they're so talented. I was intimidated to like look like a fool next to them. And they're just remarkably talented. And they ended up doing a dance competition where they invited us to be judges too. And I felt terrible about that because I didn't want to choose any one winner. Because honestly, they all deserve first place in like life, seriously. And that's not an exaggeration by any stretch. There's so much more I wish I had time to say about these kids and talk about each and every one and how remarkable and special they are, and how much they deserve and how much the world has sort of let them down. But unfortunately, we don't have that much time, so I'm going to keep talking, but we'll send ways about how we'll drop some ways that you can support this particular initiative in Gaza, if you so choose, which I would highly recommend because they are beyond deserving of it.
Thank you, honey.
Yeah. Um, Oh gosh, I thought I was done with the tears. Oh, yeah, okay. So, um, Musa, the young man in the bottom right picture there, he is another instructor with the Camp Breakers crew who has been a part of it. And like I said, the damage in the Camp Breakers crew building came from when his family's house was bombed. The house was bombed in the middle of the night when 15 people were inside. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, please, Nancy, that him and his cousin were the only survivors in that house.
Him and his
Um,
brother,
him
him
and
and
his brother,
with the other
um,
the young guy.
who is the only family they have left, right? That's their only immediate, all the rest of their immediate family, their sisters, their parents were killed. And I think the only people they have otherwise are their uncle and cousins. Um, you can't see it in the slide. I'm gonna try to zoom in a little bit, but on the ruins of the house here, they there was a slab of the concrete of the house where they wrote the names of their two young sisters, their baby sisters who were killed, Tuta and Rania. And so there's still this constant effort to realize that no matter how many Palestinians are killed, no matter how much the world decides that this is normal when it shouldn't be, Palestinians will never be numbers. And there's always every opportunity that people take to make sure that their family and their loved ones are memorialized in some way. Um, and this is some of the instructors here on the bottom left with some of the Camp Breakers instructors crew. And just for the sake of time, this is them talking about the video. I'm going to go through it really quickly since it's not in English anyway.
كل بني ادم طموحه انه يسافر يطلع برا غزه. تمام. بس في الاول وفي الاخير مركزك غزه. بس في الاول وفي الاخير مركزك الرئيسي بلدك اللي انت ما بتقدرش تستغنى عنها غزه. بيتك، حياتك، عملك، شغلك كله في غزه. لما تطلع
They're just talking about the conditions that they lived in, that they're being forced into at the moment. But one of the things that was remarkable too about Musa was that he was the one who, Musa in the bottom right here, is the one who lost his family. And as he was telling us the story, myself and at least two of the other doctors that were with us, I don't know if you were there at that time or if you were talking to Muhammad, Nancy, but he was telling the story and we got teary-eyed. And on top of that, he goes, no, don't cry. He was like, this is nasib from God, and we say alhamdulillah, we say thank God. So they maintain a sense of faith that is that I quite frankly don't understand. I just don't.
Can I add in?
Yeah.
You may have mentioned this, and my brain, watching this is like just floods everything. But Musa, who's the instructor that was in the green shirt, and his brother right here in the blue shirt. Did you mention they were dug out of the rubble by this brother right here, Muhammad, in the yellow and black? He's the one that pulled the only two survivors of that house out of the rubble. And they were talking about that, like how he saved their lives. But this young boy on the right pulled the young brothers out of the rubble. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, and it's crazy how many people have those stories, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, like this, but that's not unique. That's probably one of the worst parts about it, right? Is that everybody's like, yeah, that happened to me too, or I know that it happened to my family. Going on to the next. So we also got to visit, as I mentioned earlier, the Delia Arts Camp. So Delia Arts is a foundation dedicated to promoting artistic creativity in Gaza by fostering potential career paths for Gazan youth. And they operate in Congo. It's not just Gaza. They're an international foundation, but they do have a base in Gaza. And in response to the genocide and people being displaced from their homes, they sort of rented this saha, we call it in Arabic. It's kind of like this courtyard, a large courtyard, and they set up 15 camps there for artists and their families who had been impacted by the ongoing genocide. And this is just another way that art and creativity is used to sort of distract and foster trauma therapy with the youth. So I know I'm already running over on time, so I'm going to just play the video of the beautiful kids singing with Soul Band, who I would highly recommend following on Instagram. I will send that link in a follow-up email to their Instagram in a way that you can continue to support the Delia Arts Camp in particular, as they support local artists and people around them in surrounding refugee camps.
فلسطين عربية عربية الأولى والقضية العربية فلسطين عربية عربية الأولى والقضية العربية فلسطين عربية عربية الأولى والقضية العربية.
So, I mean, this presentation is probably, hopefully, an indication of the sort of emotions that we experience, right? It goes from like up to down, up to down, up to down. And that's just the way life is in Gaza right now. And I learned so much about that kind of patience and just being able to adapt from them, even in those 2 weeks, and especially the youth. I mean, it's just remarkable. Nancy, is there anything you'd like to add about Delia before I go on?
No, just follow them, Delia Arts Foundation, support them if you can, follow the Soul Band. We're gonna send out a series of links for folks on the ground. I think one of the most important things that we got out of this was being able to see where the aid is going, or not going, I should say, to be able to understand who's doing the work on the ground so that we can direct folks to donate to the right places. And so we will send out a list of different organizations, a list of different people that are doing work with the kids. And so we can all support however we can. We are going to come back to that day though, in a little while, but I'll let you go on.
Thank you, Nance. Yeah, we'll get back to that here. I just wanted to finish with the activities of the kids. We didn't put the whole video of the puppet show because it was pretty goofy. It turned out to be a 14-minute puppet show, but we did do a puppet show for the kids at Tala Sultan Clinic, which again is the primary care clinic. It's a field clinic set up in Rafah. The picture to the right includes the director of the clinic, Dr. Musa, who is AKA Nancy's dad, because he looks remarkably like him. And that was something that they bonded over quite a bit. I cannot stress enough how kind of a soul this person is. When we mentioned the idea of doing something for the kids at Tala Sultan or in the area, he was like, oh, I'll clear my office for you guys and set it up. Like, just tell me what you need and when you want to do it. And just like that, he did. And so we did do a puppet show with a chef and a camel and a monkey and a horse and a donkey and a myriad of animals who it was like a cooking lesson of lentils, which is one of the dishes that everybody seems to be tired of. So it was a silly time. And again, if we muster up the courage, maybe we'll send the video of, or at least a clip of the puppet show in the follow-up email. But this picture to the left includes the folks and the children and their parents who were with them. After the show, we passed out some balloons and some chocolates for them to take home. And it was just those little moments that we hung on to sort of survive the rest of it, honestly. And maybe I'm speaking for you there, Nance, but that's how I felt about it anyway. Yeah, I had to throw this slide in because there's just some folks worth mentioning. Nancy's out here fake cooking with some of the journalists, so I'm sure that on this top left picture here, most of you, if not all of you, will recognize Bisan Auda, who has been documenting what are we on, like day 190, 91, something like that of this genocide, and has been documenting sort of relentlessly and as her own life is under threat, right? And she's not the only one. So the journalists sort of move around and migrate where they can get internet, where they can seek a modicum of safety. And they were kind enough to invite us to a iftar dinner on top of that. So like they never lost the generosity that comes with the Palestinian spirit. and just shouting them out. Shabab Gaza is an initiative created by, it literally means the youth of Gaza. Muhammad Abu Rajala, who's in this picture, one to the right, is heavily involved, and they do basically mutual aid distribution. And so food, toys, entertaining kids. And it was funny because when I first talked to Muhammad, he had mentioned how he did not want, I asked him, I said, do you guys have a donation link where people can contribute from outside? And he was like, I don't even want contributions from outside. He's like, I don't seek them. What I generally do is, he's a content creator, and that was his work before the genocide began. And he uses that skill along with the Shabab Gaza team to continue making content, and they make money off of their sponsorships from that content. And that's primarily how they fund their mutual aid distributions. However, he did say that if people want to donate, we can collect funds and distribute them. I think Nancy and I have both been able to do that, but we will continue those efforts, and that will, the link to donate to Shabab Gaza's mutual aid efforts, along with Bisan Auda's mutual aid efforts, Ilna, I think is the name. We will send both of those links out where I mean, there's a lot of people helping, there's a lot of NGOs, but one of the things that I think is imperative is that these are the people who are from Gaza, that know this place. This is their friends, family, and community that they're working with to support. And so I think it's absolutely vital that more than anything, these initiatives do be supported. Because again, these are the people who are from these communities. They know where the aid can go. They know how to maximize it. And they do a hell of a job at it. And there's no reason to assume that anybody would do it better than they would. And so we'll drop those links in a follow-up email where you can support those. And I'll make sure to outline this information so you know who's who when you're looking at the links. Basima, who is an administrative assistant at the Indonesian hospitals on the bottom right there. She was a joy. She was hilarious, entertaining, and just a wonderful human being. Nancy, fake cooking with the journalists after they invite us to iftar on the bottom left there. Two of those journalists again. One of the kids and me in that would come to the van, who I had to take a photo of because he would just come greet us every day. He was one of the kids who had texted on the day we were leaving. They thought we were leaving from the hospital and they'd be able to get to see us again. And he sent us, me and Nancy, I believe, a message saying, I woke up early to say goodbye to you guys today. Because we thought we were going to have the chance to see him. We did not, but we've still been keeping in touch. And we told him that we would definitely be back. And so, yeah, had to mention that because what the most important thing about Gaza arguably is the people. And there should be no question as to why. Gazawiyin are like some of the most resilient, remarkable, resourceful, and strong people in the world. And I mean, I think about the conditions that they're in now and how much they've been able to do under these conditions. And I often think that if they had a fraction of the freedom of movement and the freedom to survive and to grow, how much more they would accomplish even than they already have, which is truly a feat unlike any other group of people that I've seen. I want to go back to a photo before I get into this part where Nancy's going to take over. So I don't know, Nancy, I don't know if you think I should share the photo. I'm happy to do it. I didn't put it on here initially because it just, I don't know. But the day that we went to Delia Arts here, and we got to we got to listen to this beautiful music. Before that, there was a really heartbreaking moment. We were on our way to Delia Arts, and we were along the same road that is now sort of the main road to travel north and south through Gaza, where the WCK workers were later bombed and killed. That's supposed to be a deconflicted route. That is the same road where I would venture to say that the overwhelming majority of tents are located along that road, which is alongside the beach. And one of the things that you'll often see, of course, as the weather was warming up in the second half of our trip, was youth heading out to the ocean, either to catch reprieve from the heat or just to find a modicum of joy. As we're driving a little bit more north of Rafah towards the Delia Arts Camp, there is a large crowd of people that are stationed next to the ocean, and we had our windows open, and Nancy had heard people like sort of exclaiming in a way, and she had asked them what was wrong, and somebody had mentioned a drowning, and so we had two of our doctors with us, Dr. Aman and Dr. Noor, who, without second question, jumped out of what was almost a moving van, to do some resuscitation and CPR and CPR. And lo and behold, there was a boy. His name was Muhammad. He was maybe 13, probably younger. And he was laid down on this sort of large rock, and had been pulled from the ocean after drowning. And Aman and Noor had tried for a solid 22 minutes to resuscitate this child, and it seemed as though he had passed before he was even pulled out of the water. But nonetheless, they did everything they could, and beyond. And while we were there, we were trying to at least get an ambulance to transport the martyred boy's body to somewhere else so they could issue a death certificate and do the due diligence that was necessary. And even in that area, you can't get enough signal to call an ambulance. Our driver, Ahmed, was trying to call the entire time they were doing CPR, and to no avail. Coincidentally, an ambulance had been driving by, and we had flagged them down and explained the situation, and they were carrying so many injured people up to the Palestinian Red Crescent a little bit further north from where we were, that they didn't have room for the boy, and so they asked if we could take him in our van, and if we could take him in our van and drop him off at the PCRF sort of headquarters down the road. And so we did, and myself and Dr. Noor had Muhammad's body on her lap as we were driving north to take him off, and the entire time I was trying to hold his hand steady and hold his body steady as we were making it through traffic. And I just imagined, I didn't get to see his mom, we didn't get to talk to his parents. We tried to find them, but they weren't immediately nearby, and so people from the camp were going to let them know. And so I kept thinking to myself, like, how are his parents going to feel? God knows how many times they'd been forced from their home, till they finally made it to what they thought was a safe place. And as their child was trying to find a modicum of joy in the midst of what was, of the horrors of a genocide, he drowned. And it's just unfathomable. It's just unfathomable the level of pain people are going through. And these are people. I mean, there's no other way to say it, right? They're human beings, and we wouldn't accept that for our neighbors. We wouldn't accept it for people that we see on the streets, and yet people expect Gaza to endure this time and time and time again, and this time to a degree that has never been seen. And so Allah yarhamah, may God rest his soul, Muhammad, and give his family all the patience and endurance in the world. But he didn't make it. And so that's, I'm not sure there's anything else to say. Nance, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that day was the perfect, and everybody's been asking me, I haven't even been able to like put my thoughts together, to be honest. And what I can say is that it's the happiest and saddest place I've ever been in my life. And you can literally go from, 0 to 100 back to 0. There's so many moments throughout the years, that of all the stuff that I've seen and been exposed to from doing these kinds of delegations and trips. But that's, that is what it is. We went from, going to see an organization that we've been working with, and also you can add story upon story, because Delia Arts, their director in Gaza that was wearing the green t-shirt, Ayman Magamis, when I went in 2009, I'd known him for years prior to that. But Eamon's father was bombed in their home on January 16th of 2009, on Eamon's birthday, actually. Um, and so they'd lost that home and his father, and then lost their home now. His mum lost her new home, and he lost his home that he has with his two kids and his pregnant wife. And they've been moving. They went and stayed in Nuseirat. Nuseirat got hit so bad they went to Khan Yunis, and from Khan Yunis now they're in these tents by the sea. And everybody has a story. Basima, the administrative assistant that Maureen showed you the picture of her with and said she was a beautiful soul, her two nephews, babies, her brother was sitting there with her. He works in the hospital too. And she was like, "Oh," I was like, "What are those pictures of?" She said, "Oh, that's my brother's kids that were killed and his wife." And I'm like, "Okay." It's like literally everybody has a story. Um, and it's a lot because everybody's story must be heard. Every single name needs to be spoken and get justice. And it's so much. Um, it's a lot. It's a lot, if you can imagine. I mean, we met so many people, like, I mean, hundreds, literally, I could tell you we met hundreds of people, and everybody wants to tell you their story. And I want to listen to everybody's story. And then we wonder, like, how do we relay this? How do we support them? How do we, there's so much work to be done. Um, on the upside, like we said, the kids give you life. As you can see from these pictures, one thing that is totally unmatched is Palestinian resilience and Palestinian hospitality and love, like we call it karama. The like Palestinians, like we are in a genocide with bombs dropping everywhere around us, and our neighbors still found time every single day to bring us up food. I'm like, we're here to support you. Like, what can we do for you? And they, as you can see, the hummus, the falafel, the sahlab at night, they would invite us down every evening to just sit with them after ftoor and, have coffee and whatever sweets. Khalil there in the blue and pink, Khalil would cook for us. And the love that we felt. I got a message today from one of the journalists. His name is Muhammad Kassas, sorry. He's the one in one of the pictures in the van with me. He sent me a message today to say hi, and um he said, "I'm embarrassed because we didn't do enough for you guys." It's like, it's really wild that they think like that, because they're so hospitable that they want you to come over, and everybody, you got to go to their home, and they want to host you and just shower you with love. And I said to him, "No, I'm sorry that the whole world has not done enough for you guys. Don't ever say sorry." You know what I mean? Like, you guys did the most amazing. I don't know if you know what a mendi is, but mendi is when they cook the chicken and the meat under the ground. And they made us chicken. The chicken had just started coming in that last week we were there, and they made us chicken underground. They actually feed their whole community, all the tents around them. They're all in tents because they're originally from Beit Hanun, from the north. But they went above and beyond, like and I mean, and literally invited all 12 doctors. Everybody wasn't able to make it. But the hospitality and the love is unmatched. It's unmatched, and it's still there. And it's just amazing to see. It's such an inspiration to see, because we take everything for granted, and I've said this a million times, that like we're so privileged. And when you go somewhere like Gaza, with everything they're enduring and how much loss every single person has felt, whether it's everything that they own or everything that they love, they still have love in their heart, and they still know how to express that love and show that love. And that's just the most inspiring thing on this earth. And they make you come back and want to be better people, and they make you come back and want to support them, in just wanting to live, just living. Why can't they just live? That's the question. That's the bottom line. It's like, why can't they just live? But it was absolutely beautiful. And Maureen, being the chef and chef she is, made this beautiful cake. Everybody contributed little parts of it. We had to get like the cacao from one neighbor and get the flour from, well, I think we brought some flour in with us because we didn't want to take from the neighbors. But it was safe down here. Safe down here is one of the families that was in the same residential building as us. And it was his 6th birthday. And so one of our doctors had the marshmallows. We tried to write his name there, as you can see. Everybody contributed something. One of the brothers from an organization, Team Humanity, Ahmed, that was on the ground with us, he had Nutella with him and we used it for the cake. I mean, everybody contributed to that cake. It was so beautiful how it came together. But you know, again, you just the love, and they message me, and I know Maureen probably as well, every single day, and just thank us for being there, for being there. People don't, I think, especially with Palestinians too, because we're Palestinian or Arabic, it's a lot of like foreign aid workers that go, but there's more and more Palestinians being able to get in, or Arabic folks that are able to get in. And so they just like the gratitude that they have, which is like we owe them. This is like the minimum of what we owe them, the most minimal thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just an amazing thing to see. And so we want to support them in every way that we can. I don't know if you want to touch a little bit just about the community and the neighbors, Maureen. And then we can open up the Q&A in a few seconds.
Yeah, I'll just add that Nancy's being really generous. I also didn't make the cake. That was equally a collective effort as much as it was to like collect the ingredients. But yeah, it was almost embarrassing. It was almost embarrassing. Actually, it was deeply embarrassing to be in this situation where everything has been taken away from these people, and yet they're still finding ways and feel an obligation to give to us. As Nancy said, I mean, we owe them, right? And the way that I see it as a Palestinian is that the only reason I can call myself Palestinian is because Gaza has endured so much. And so my identity and the reason that I am who I am is because of them, even though we don't necessarily know each other, right? And so it's more than an obligation, it's a commitment to that the Palestinian identity to do whatever we can in this moment for Gaza. And I think I know we're running a little bit over too, but do we have a moment to go through these young gents' stories? So this was a really heartbreaking moment. We were in the Indonesian field hospital, and there's a sort of little courtyard that we can hang out in. And we were meeting with a friend of Nancy's who is on the next slide, who I think she'll run his story real quickly, named Ibrahim. And taking a moment to just sort of interview and document as much of the stories of folks as possible. And I don't remember how, but these two gents whose faces are intentionally blurred and whose names we will not share at their request, had overheard us interviewing with people and mentioned the fact that they had just the day before, or maybe 2 days before, been released from captivity by Zionist forces, where they were held for 50 days. So the gentleman on the left is 32. He's got a wife and children who are stuck up north, and the gentleman on the right is 31, and his house was bombed, and he suffered severe burns on the overwhelming majority of his lower body, from his back to his legs, and needed skin grafting. And rather than after the Israelis discovered him when the house was bombed, rather than do the ethical thing, which is get him to medical care, they took him prisoner instead, and left him for 50 days without treatment. More so, they made them stand. So there's a new sort of like torture technique that is intended not to sound so bad, quote unquote, right? It's not like waterboarding or like whipping somebody or taking their nails out, but it's still just as insidious, if you will. Because what they do is make them sit on their knees, with their hands tied behind their back from sunrise to sunset. And they told us that they gave them barely scraps of food enough to survive. So like the world's smallest piece of bread with the world's smallest piece of cheese, and the thinnest slice of cucumber was the breakfast, and that would be the same thing that they would get for lunch, or for dinner, excuse me. There was no lunch. And so these two young men were both held for 50 days. The one on the right is seeking to get out of Gaza. his I after everything he's gone through, there's no question of why. But in part is because he is seeking further medical treatment for his very severe burns that he had just gotten the skin grafting for. He was outside of the hospital and his friend was with him. And while his friend didn't suffer as many injuries, obviously the psychological torture of being, you know, bombed out of your house, taken captive, held for 50 days against your will, tortured in that way, and then released without anything is just another kind of trauma. But on top of that, on top of enduring all that, the young man on the left was a barber before the genocide began. And while we were there, as I was interviewing his friend, somebody had asked him for a haircut, and sure enough, he whips out his razor and his shaver and starts cutting this young boy's hair, and he's doing it for free because he knows that they have nothing. And so this is just another way that despite everything that people have been through, they still find the smallest ways to take care of each other in every possible fashion. So I'll include the link to support the young man on the right's exit. He is trying to get out and seek medical care. So if you do have the means to support, we'll share that with you afterwards so that you can do that. And I'll pass it to Nancy for the next slide.
Wow. So this picture on the top right is me and Ibrahim Abdel 10 years ago. That's in 2014 in Nablus when Israel was bombarding, or the Zionist forces were bombarding Gaza in 2014. Him and his mother, which you see in the bottom slide, Najah, they were taking shelter at a United Nations school. And I, in 2014, spent months and months on the ground. We didn't do a delegation. We took the money that we'd raised and we went to all the hospitals that they were bringing the injured from Gaza to, and we would get them whatever they needed, clothes-wise, cell phones. I got a deal with the Palestinian company Jawal and got them cells so they could call their families back home and just be in contact with each other. So I initially met his mother, Najah, on the bottom there, in a hospital in Jerusalem, El Maqasid or the Fransawi, I can't remember which one it was, but those were the two that I was visiting. And she said to me, which is crazy because when I saw her, I hardly recognized her too, because she had got shrapnel all over her face. And she said to me that her husband had been martyred, had been killed, and her youngest son had been killed, and that she had another son, Ibrahim, that was taken to a hospital in Nablus, and she asked me if I would go see him. And she said, oh, he just got some shrapnel in his leg. And so I said, of course I will. And we took pictures together, we made a video, and I went off the next day to Nablus and I asked for Ibrahim, and they took me to his room and they were like, I don't know if you should really go in. And, and I was like, I'll go in. And I went in and he had lost a leg and a half, as you can see. And he was also really, really swollen from the shrapnel. I don't know if you've seen anybody in that, if anybody's been in those situations, but when they get any kind of trauma like that, shrapnel in their body from the infections and stuff, they're super like Michelin man, swollen. And so I was kind of in shock at first because it's not what I expected. And then I thought of his mum instantly, like, oh my God. So anyway, I held myself and I was like, hi, I'm Nancy, blah, blah, blah. And, I said to him, I saw your mum yesterday, and he starts crying and he says, oh, she's alive. I was like, yeah, she's alive. She's good. And he was like, oh, I was like, he's crying, so I want to comfort him. And I said, we took some pictures. So I went to show him the pictures, and his uncle, who's in the picture on the left there with the hat, his uncle Ziad, he looks at me and he's like, he can't see anymore. And I'm like, oh gosh. So he had temporarily lost his sight, thank God, and he got his sight back like maybe a month and a half in. But I ended up giving him the cell phone, and he calls his mom, and he finds out that his dad and his brother had been killed, because he was telling his mum, I'm calling dad's cell phone, I think someone stole it. And she told him that his dad had passed. And I, till this day, this is 10 years ago, I still hear the scream that he let out when his mother told him that. Anyway, for years I hadn't spoken to them, and then when this happened in when they started the slaughter of our people in Gaza in October, the most recent one, I thought of them and I did everything. I called people and I finally got his number. And he was, I was like, what do you need? And he was like, I don't need anything. I don't need anything. I'm good. And then he was like, you know what? Like maybe like a month later, he had sent his family to Rafah and he was still in the north to kind of take care of their home. And um, I spoke to him again and I said, do you need anything? And he said, I want to be able to get some flour for my family. This was back in November of last year. And he asked me for $40. And I tried, different ways. It's not, there was no money available, there was nothing functioning because, the situation, obviously. So I didn't really know how to get it there. I didn't know anyone that was going in, obviously. Um, and I tried different ways. I connected him to different people to try and help. And then a couple of weeks ago, I called him and I said, since I couldn't get anyone to you, I decided to just bring it myself. And he comes to the hospital. And he just cried when he saw me. He just cried and cried. And we gave him like a little bit, like a couple of $100 to be able to support. He has four daughters, his mother, his uncle right here. Again, everybody has a story. His uncle right here, Ziad. We were talking to his young son, and he was showing us the pictures. Ziad's wife and four other children, including a pregnant daughter and two kids of his other daughter, were all killed in a bombing. Um, and it's just ongoing trauma, just ongoing atrocities. And Ibrahim, actually, the brother in the wheelchair, Ibrahim Abdul, when he sent his family to the south, when we met with him in Rafah 2 weeks ago, he had just got out from under the rubble of his home and then made it down to the south. He said it took him a while because it was expensive to try and get on a donkey and carriage with the wheelchair. And so for the most part, he just wheeled himself. And he moves, he's strong, and anyway, we gave him like like $200, and it was really so that he could feed his four daughters and his wife and his mum for the next month or two, whatever that lasts. And the next day he comes back with 2 bottles of perfume and a ring for me and Maureen. Like this is what I'm talking about, and I'm like, bro, what are you doing? Like I got mad at him because I'm like, why are you doing this? He's like, you're our guests and we haven't seen you in 10 years. And this is our way of like, showing you that we love you and thank you. And you know what I mean? And it's just another example of like the Palestinian love that they have in their heart. Like, why would you take money that we just gave you and then go and buy us gifts with it? You need to feed your family. But it's a pride too. It's a lot of the pride. And I could tell you stories for days about, Palestinian men that we met that were in tears that, just I can't imagine just knowing, my father's a Palestinian, my brother's a Palestinian, my uncle's, my grandfather, I know how much pride we have as a people, and we don't put our hand out and ask for anything, even when we need it. And they're just in a situation where they're gonna die or they have to ask for help. And it's just, it's degrading, and it's, in their eyes, they're embarrassed. And I keep telling them there's nothing to be embarrassed about at all whatsoever. But just again, a show of love, how full of love our people are. And this was, for me, this moment to be able to reconnect with them after 10 years, it was very special. And I got to meet all his four daughters. He only had one daughter who was 2 years old in 10 years ago when I met him. He had and she's actually not in these pictures. Rahaf, her name is. The one in these pictures is named after his mum, Najah. But Rahaf was 2 years old, and we had sent back with him when he left. That was the day he was leaving the hospital on the top right, in 2014. And I had, spent a couple months visiting him at that point. And we were walking him to the ambulance there that was taking him back to Gaza. And we got, when I asked him what he needed to take back with him, he just asked for a gift for his daughter. And so we got a dress and a bag. He asked for a bag of candy, but I got this huge, like, trash bag sized bag of candy. He was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just give it out to the kids." But yeah, it was just that, just all these stories need to be told, every single one of them. And so we're going to tell them whenever we have an opportunity to. I'm sorry, I know we kind of went over time. Just you want to. Oh, these right here, yes. These pictures right here that you're looking at is his uncle's wife. His wife in this bottom second picture from the left. That's his wife, his daughters. The top one in the white hijab. Um she was pregnant when they killed her. His other daughter on the top right, and her three kids at the bottom there, on the right hand side, and his other son, and other daughters. It's just everybody has a story. The doctor on the right, this is in Shuhada al-Aqsa Hospital. He was showing us how he was, in last summer, and how he is now. Um, yeah, the car, yeah. The picture of the car. Every car, if a car does have any glass on it, it's completely smashed. I don't even know how they see out of it. I'm talking about ambulances, everything. Um, the United Nations, when we would go to the meetings, they would talk about how much benzene they allow in, like, and it's also prioritized for ambulances and for UN cars and vehicles, for NGOs. So there isn't much gas, and so if a car is running, it looks like this. And usually the doors are open. All the cars that are driving down the street have doors open because there's about 17 people in each car, so there's no way you can actually close the doors. um People sitting in the trunks, little kids. We have so many videos, and we will at some point make a video and share it, but like the kids jump on the back of a huge trucks. If a huge, like, aid truck or some vehicle is moving, they'll jump on the back of it. I mean, it's also very high risk behavior. And but they do it, and otherwise it's donkey and cart. And the donkeys looked exhausted too. um
Mm.
so I don't know if you want to add to that, and then we should probably definitely do some Q&A because we're way over time.
Yeah. Thank you guys for bearing with us. As you can imagine and tell, it's just that we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg. I feel like I was talking kind of slow and stuff, but there's still so much more that I wish we could share with you all. I do just want to add, for the sake of time and a conclusion, our delegation was made up of a wonderful group of people who clearly put a pause on their lives and paid their way to come do whatever they could for the people of Gaza. But one thing that people should know, first and foremost, and always keep in mind, is that Gaza is not a humanitarian project. It is not some natural disaster that has struck this place that requires the need of other people to step in. The reality is that every single story that we've talked about and every image that comes out of there is otherwise preventable in terms of the horrible tragedies that they've endured. And I say that because while the humanitarian assistance is now needed, the reality of this is that it is and has been a political issue, right? And this is not a new political issue. This is a continuation of a policy that we've seen for over 75 years, since before this establishment of the State of Israel on Palestinian land. And so while your assistance is appreciated, and we do encourage you to donate to those links that we're going to send out and to continue to support monetarily in any way, please always remember that this is a political cause behind this, and it therefore requires a political solution. To simply look at Gaza and say that this is a humanitarian issue and throw your money in that direction is not enough. It will create the conditions for this to keep happening if we don't step up and use everything within our power, even if it means stepping out of our comfort zones in terms of what we can do. But these people deserve the world and they've been given so much less. And if it means just being slightly uncomfortable in ways that we're unfamiliar with to try to do what we can to stop this, then I think that that's what we should do. And that's the lesson that I'm bringing back with me. And just thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Han. Yeah, just to add, like we said, we will be sending out lists. You know, the main conclusions that I want to leave with is, you know, we are witnessing online and whatever news channels that you're seeing, not even 2% of what is happening on the ground. We can't translate the smell to you. The conditions that were being reported by the health cluster at the United Nations of malaria becoming an issue in Palestine. You know, the aid trucks, they're not, I have a 3-minute video of thousands and thousands of aid trucks that are just parked up collecting dust on the in Al Arish, which is about 35 minutes 40 minutes out of the Rafah border. And so as we were driving in, there was thousands of trucks, and as we drove out, and you know, 35-minute drive into the Sinai, just thousands of trucks parked up with aid. Not to mention the aid's coming in with maggots. Aid is coming in with you know, canned goods that Palestinians don't want. They don't want the canned goods. They can grow their own vegetables. They can, you know, they can farm themselves. You know, they need this to stop. And so, you know, there was a lot of talk about, you know, these larger orgs that are sending in trucks of aid, which some people get and some people don't. I mean, that's a whole nother, maybe we have to do a part 2 to this about the aid and show some of the folks that were speaking to us about that. But we did identify folks on the ground, like we said, and we will share those links with you so that you can support people that are buying and sourcing locally and actually going and giving to the people that need it the most. Oh, I think we can go to Q&A now. If you want to drop any questions in the chat, and I will try and go through a couple of them. We'll do maybe just like 10 minutes, and then I know a lot of people have to leave. You said good quality earplugs are essential for Gazans. How can we get them to them? I don't know if earplugs is an answer. I think getting rid of the drones and the occupation would be a better a better solution. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to do it. You know, they're as abnormal as the situation is, it is somewhat normalized between them to be able to deal with you know, the constant harassment and like we said, psychological warfare. We appreciate everybody's beautiful comments. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to type them in.
There is, sorry, Nancy, to cut you off here. There is just one question, which is when is the next delegation scheduled? So GLIA has been rotating physicians in and out typically every 2 weeks. Some people in delegations will stay longer if they're able. But the next delegation, for example, I think went in, I think their new entry dates are Wednesdays. So it's just a constant rotation also of folks. So if you do want to continue to find ways to support folks, please do email us. I'm going to drop my email in the chat too. That way, if you have any questions about particular topics that we've discussed or ways that you'd like to support particular initiatives that we didn't offer, you're welcome to email me and we can talk about that some more.
Yeah, if you are a healthcare worker for now, a healthcare worker, and you're interested in going, feel free to email us, and we can connect you. As far as everybody else, we are and have been planning on a huge Gaza convoy, which we started working on a couple of months ago. And we are still planning on doing that as soon as it is safe enough to take folks in, safer than it is now, definitely not under active bombing. And so that effort would be for people to help clean up, people to work with the children, to do, you know, various activities. You do not have to be a licensed, you know, therapy specialist, mental health clinician. We definitely we definitely want to have as many people apply to that as possible once we open that up, and we will definitely be emailing everybody once we're ready, once we're at that stage. And so we are working towards that. So if people are interested, keep your eye out, make sure that you're signed up to our newsletters, which also, just to plug really quick again, the virtual delegation at the end of the month, that will be happening on El Khalil. And crazily enough, while we were in Gaza, we got a call that our videographer, Michel, he's Palestinian, was actually shot at by the soldiers in Hebron, Khalil, while he was filming. And so he'll be on that webinar to speak about that moment as well. We also we haven't made this hugely public yet, although we do have a link on our website on upcoming events, but we have an evening Witnessing Palestine with an amazing lineup, which is happening on June 2nd in Chicago. If folks are interested in coming to Chicago and attending our evening, please go to our website, www.eyewitnesspalestine.org, and go to upcoming events. And if you scroll down, you will see for June 2nd, we have a dinner type of benefit that we will be holding. We would love to see all of our folks, especially folks in the area, come to that event. Seems to me that to put the brakes on genocide, US citizens need to vote third party in November and stop voting. Yeah, well, we wish. Would it be supportive to organize people to go to Egypt and support people newly arriving there from Gaza? I know people are doing that. There are Gazans that are there also on the ground that are willing to organize. And we had a Palestinian family who just arrived like a month and a half prior to us getting there in Egypt, and they supported us with everything until this day, have supported us. I want everyone to know too, since Maureen and I have been back for a week and a half, between myself, Maureen, my aunt Kim, I wanted to shout her out. We have raised almost 30,000. Kim and her folks in Baltimore and San Diego donated almost 13,000 the first time for mutual aid on the ground. And that was while we were there, and we watched that get distributed. And then Maureen, myself, and with the help of my aunt, I think you did 10 and we did 6, almost 16,000 for Shabab Ghazi, who were doing the mutual aid on the ground. And I also raised the 5,000 through my amazing friends for a family to get the father out of Ghazi. They had lost 3 small children, a 3-year-old Ganaan, I'll always say their names, 3-year-old Ganaan, a 6-year-old Diala, and a 14-year-old Yara, were all murdered by the occupation. And the mother is now with the 2 remaining boys, Adam and Rukan, in Egypt. And so the father is stuck in Gaza, still under bombardment, and the one thing the kids wanted was their dad. And so we raised the 5,000 that the Egyptians are making, benefiting off of our people to get them out of Gaza. And so we've been going super hard the last week and a half. So, again, we really ask people to please support us. This is what we do, and we're not going to stop till Palestine and other oppressed folks are liberated. And so we can't do that without people's help. So I truly hope that people will keep supporting Eyewitness and different people on the ground. Thank you so much, Diana. Maureen, you mentioned that although appreciated aid is not a solution, other than protesting, what kind of other action should folks take for Palestine? From Nana.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Nana. That's I think it's an important question, and I think we can do a whole nother webinar on this topic, quite frankly. But to keep it short and within the scope of what we're intended to talk about here today, let me say first of all that I think all actions are necessary, right? People are coming into this in different levels. Some people are hearing about it for the first time. Some people have circumstances that prevent them from getting engaged in sort of higher risk types of political actions. I think I think rallies are important in terms of like networking and momentum for a movement, right? But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, are the actions that I'm taking more for my sense of release and to make myself feel better, or are they productive towards an ultimate goal, right? And I think that that's a question that a lot of communities, organizing communities, are trying to reconcile with in this moment. And I'm not going to pretend to have the right answer. But what I do think is that there are opportunities to organize in those spaces that are closest to you. I always suggest that people advocate locally as much as possible because that's where your voice has the most impact, right? So if electoralism is your thing, there are places where you can get input on what Palestinians are saying, both locally and nationally, on how to engage in electoralism or not engage, right? As a refusal. Um, um, and I think there's stuff like being able to organize, like looking at the connections, right? Palestine is a social justice issue. The question of Zionism is a question of colonialism, which is a question of capitalism, if you're looking at it from that point too. And so I think talking about organizing within labor unions, organizing at your place of work, and looking at the way your work helps to support and uplift Zionism in whatever way, and organizing against that is productive. I think if we had structures like this in place to begin with, we could see more momentum around things like global strikes, right? I always hesitate with this idea of a global strike because there's a massive amount of infrastructure that is required to do something like that, that is not necessarily present. And there are some good reasons for that and some not so good reasons for that. But I think if you belong to professional affiliations, do educational events, right? Start talking about this and building awareness in that way. If you are on campus, find your local student body, that's a group that's organizing. Look at BDS campaigns, right? Economic divestment campaigns those are always opportunities, and they may be longer term fights, but I do think we have a duty as US citizens and taxpayers, if nothing else, if you have no other thing to say about Palestine, I think that you could speak on this from the standpoint that these are your tax dollars that could otherwise go to funding your children's healthcare, public education, improving infrastructure in the United States, and instead they're going to bomb kids in the Middle East at unprecedented rates, and in Gaza in particular. And I think every American should be asking themselves the question of why, and realize that there are better things to do with that. So, yeah, different ways to do it. Tapping in locally, I think, is the primary, and I'm going to stop talking on that point because I'm rambling more than I wanted anyway.
No, that's perfect and all true. We've gone way over, so I just want to give a couple of shout outs. Somebody donated $400. Thank you. We appreciate it very, very much. Thank you to everybody for all their donations. We'll continue doing this work. We're trying to get voices from the ground. It is difficult, from Gaza due to the internet service, or lack of, we should say. But like I said, we are trying to get some of the directors. And actually, I just have to say, one of the first pictures that Maureen showed was the director of Shuhada al-Aqsa Hospital. His name is Kamal al-Khatib. And I want to say that they murdered his whole family, and he was the only one that made it out of the rubble. I'm like, when we tell you that every single person has a story, it's not an exaggeration. Everybody has a story, every single person. And as much as I can, every time I remember to and I'm able to, I will always, say their names and try and elevate their voices, and, until they get justice that they deserve. And so we are going to try and get some of those directors and healthcare workers to join us to talk about the way that the occupation has hit the infrastructure of Gaza as a whole. We didn't even touch on that, to be honest, just the infrastructure, to talk about how there is absolutely no police whatsoever because, the government is Hamas. That's the government of Gaza. You can't change that. I can't hide that. I can't, you know. And so Ministry of Health is under that government. And so the Ministry of Health employees are all a target. They sleep in the hospitals. They don't even leave the hospitals. That's why when they uh when they massacred the Palestinians in Shifa Hospital recently, which that needs its own Zoom by itself. The doctors don't leave the hospitals. Where are they going to go? They're already under threat. The Ministry of Health, the police, all the bombed up vehicles we saw were police cars. So there's no police. So it's absolute, you know, people could do whatever they want. But I will say the beautiful thing about Palestinians is that they don't really need the police, to be honest. I think the only issue that they had was the gorging, the price gorging from certain people taking advantage of what, you know, of the situation, you know, or being like they only have 7 bags of sugar, so they're going to sell it to the highest bidder, you know what I'm saying, or something like that. It was wild to see. I mean, people that did have businesses where they sold stuff, they would have a small pickup truck or whatever, and they would have armed armed men, you know, having to protect their goods. But in general, we did see a lot of frustration on the streets too, like people just taking out their frustration on each other. But the community comes together, and if an elder steps in at any point, everyone's going to shut up and respect their elders. We still have that in Palestine. And so, you know, when we think about like lawlessness, it's like we didn't see anything crazy, and people, we don't, it's just not in the culture there. And so even though there was absolutely no police or no, like, you know, there was no law enforcement whatsoever from Emin to Shurta to nothing. It was wild to see, but then also beautiful to see, because it just shows you that we could, you know, not have police. um, and that they were able to, you know, handle situations alone, you know, in as a community, rather than, you know, someone that's being paid to come in and beat you into doing what they want you to do. So yeah, a lot of stuff that we could talk about as far as the, you know, the collapse of every system that there is there. Um there is a lot that the doctors witnessed, and I take my kafiyeh off for them. um you know, these doctors were amazing. We could have a Zoom just about the doctors and the things they did, from you know, Dr. Aman and Noor that jumped out the moving vehicle to help the drowning the drowned young boy Muhammad Shoikh, to our Dr. Cameron, who we did not deconflict the route, but he went to examine an 8-year-old girl who had been shot in the head through her tent, who still has a bullet in her head. He went with Team Humanity, and you know, he wanted to go, and we made the decision to let him go. And he did without coordination, which is dangerous on our part. But it's also like nobody in Palestine has a deconfliction privilege, you know what I'm saying, except for us. So it's like you make the choice: should we go and check if this young 8-year-old girl is going to make it till tomorrow, or should we be privileged and be like, no, the Israelis didn't give us permission, so we're not going to go. And so there was choices like that we had to make. And so yeah, I'll just leave it there. And you know, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to email us, info@eyewitnesspalestine.org. I'm sure we'll be doing some follow-ups, definitely. And again, we appreciate the support. If you are a monthly donor, we truly appreciate you. Thank you so much. If you are not and would like to be, feel free to reach out to me. You know, we can only do the work with everybody's support. And we, you know, we try and be as transparent as possible, and show you the work that we're doing, and we highlight different orgs doing work on the ground, because everybody needs it. I don't think everything should go to one. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I donate to this org, or I donate to this org. I think we should be supporting everyone and anyone that is doing the work, and that has shown you know, the type of work that they do, and the impact that it has. And so we will continue to highlight those organizations and those people ourselves and support them however we can. So I thank everybody for their support. And thank you to our board, who have been so amazingly supportive throughout all of this. And even today, most of them are in here. just ready to hold us down in case we break down. We did pretty good. Had our moments, but we appreciate you. We love you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I mean, huge shout out to the board, like Nancy said, for their support, but also in particular to the co-chairs of the board, Sharon and Jaisha, who made our trip possible by stepping in and covering for us while we were gone. And you know, that's a experience of a lifetime in so many ways. And so just deep gratitude for y'all for believing so much in this work that you step in as needed.
Thank you, folks. We're sending love. Please talk about Palestine to someone today and share stories. I'm going to stop the